Hello everyone, welcome back to a new video. I'm Carl here at carlstaceyguitartuiton, and today, as you can see from the title and the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about Blink-182 and just kind of going through the journey of their career of albums and ordering them and ranking them and all of that sort of stuff. Did a video similar to this for Sum 41 if you want to check that out on my channel recently as well. And we're going to jump straight into it. So one preface before I jump into this list here is this is rated worst to best. Okay, I say that in quotation marks because these are all albums that are great. There's nothing wrong with any of these albums. This is a band that I love, that is incredibly influential to me, and all of that good stuff, alright? So it's more so just picking the worst out of the best bunch more than anything, if I'm being completely honest with you. So let's jump into it. Number 9 in this list, unfortunately, and it's going to annoy a lot of people I feel because of the heritage of the band, is Cheshire Cat. And the only reason for this is because of the age and the budget that this album was recorded with. I feel like really hold it back a hell of a lot. Not necessarily the songs or anything else, realistically. Of course, they matured a lot and got a lot better as musicians further down the career. It's no lie that they weren't the best musicians early on or in general. Everyone knows this, even fans of the band know that. So obviously the performances on this album are very of the time and very kind of immature musically. In the recording obviously doesn't sound that good because of the budget that we were working with at the time, which makes a whole lot of sense. That's naturally the way that most bands' first albums or EPs or whatever go. You're obviously working with such a low budget in comparison to if your career takes off. But unfortunately in this case, I feel like it just really holds the album back in terms of revisiting it or listening to it for entertainment purposes here in 2025. Next up on this list, and this is another great album. Like I said before, this is worst to best, but they're all good albums across the board. This is just my personal order in terms of what I tend to gravitate towards or prefer or find the most influential. Next up is Dude Ranch. This is an amazing album. Like a classic Blink album. Everyone that's a fan of the band or pop punk in general knows this and would say that. I'm more than certain of it. But again, I don't think it's necessarily the recording or the production of this one that holds it back, because it's a hell of a lot better than Cheshire Cat in that aspect, and I'm more than happy to listen to it through modern speakers and things. It's not an issue really in that capacity. I think it's just mainly an era thing. I was born in 95, so I grew up in the early 2000s, so the Blink albums that impacted my life, my upbringing, were the ones from the early 2000s. So this is more of like it just doesn't hold as much of a sentimental place in my heart or in my mind as some of the later albums do. Again, not to knock the songs or anything like that, because there's some of my all-time favorite Blink songs on this album, to be honest with you. I love the artwork, I love the vibe. If there's only one other negative I could add to it is the fact that obviously still Travis wasn't in the band. So I think musically it's held back a little bit, drumming wise, because of how much Travis elevated everything from Enema onwards, right? So that's probably the only other negative I could probably chuck into this mix here today. Neighborhoods is the first album that I remember actually coming out, and I remember talking about it with everyone at school, and because I grew up in the early 2000s, so I got into Blink, and then by the time I was really into the band, they were pretty much just about broken up, if not breaking up, like 2005-ish, right? 2004, 5, that kind of period, and then obviously Plus 44 Inch and Airwaves came after that. So I never really got a chance to experience the band, as an active band, anything like that. Never got a chance to see them live or anything. When Neighborhoods came out, that was the first album that I actually got to see them live for the first time, which is life-changing for me. I remember talking about the album in school with everyone, things like that. But looking back, it's one of the albums that I tend to revisit the least, to be honest with you. I just feel like it's a good album. Again, some really good songs on there, absolutely. 100% agree with that, especially the singles. But I think maybe they just weren't in the right place still as a band, even though they had the break, they came back, they settled some differences, etc. I still feel like maybe there was some underlying things that weren't addressed that really impacted the music negatively, that it just didn't feel as impactful or as creative or as fun as it could or it should. And for me personally, that just kind of disconnects the album a little bit for me, sentimental value-wise. Next on the list is the first album with Skiba in the band, and that is going to be California, alright? So again, I actually really love this album, right? I'm one of those people that is a Skiba defender. He's an amazing musician, guitar player, singer. Outline Trio is great. Obviously, most people agree with that, right? But they just never felt like he had a place in Blink. I'm one of those people that genuinely actually loves the albums that he is a part of with Blink. I really don't think they're as bad as people think they are or make them out to be. I think there's so many solid tracks in those albums, and I'm actually more than likely to revisit those two albums than I am a lot of other Blink albums in the recent kind of 10, 15 years, to be honest with you. So think what you think and say what you will, but I love this album. I remember coming out once again. Came out when I was sort of more or less an adult at that point. So yeah, it was just really cool to see this album come out, and I still revisit it to this day. Next up in this list, forgive me for my light keeps going off here. Next up in this list for me is the next Skiba album, which is going to be 9. So 9 to me is just a little bit better, and I think, again, this is more sentimental value. This is what I'm trying to kind of rank and rate a lot of these off as more like emotional, sentimental, memory, nostalgia, etc. Yeah. So California is a really fun album. It sounds like California. The name is kind of what it sounds like, the sun and the beach and all this cool fun stuff. 9 is a lot darker, a lot more serious, but I was going through a really dark, serious period in my life, literally when that album came out. And I swear to God, at the time, I remember reading the lyrics, listening to the songs, and it just felt like it was written for me in this weird, like, kind of emotional way. And I remember, like, especially No Heart to Speak Of, things like that, songs like that, I remember hearing them and being like, whoa, like, this is hitting me so goddamn hard right now. And so for that reason, it's not an album that I necessarily revisit as much, really, these days at least, but it just has a massive place in my heart for the reasons I've just mentioned, alright? So now we're getting to the top 4, we're almost getting there, we're almost in the top 3, everyone's always bothered about the top 3 when it comes to things like this. So number 4 for me is Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. Again, this could be number 2 for some people, number 1 for some other people, that sort of thing. It's not for me. Purely just because the other albums I either think are better or just hold a little bit more of a stronger place in my heart, really. So again, we're talking about Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. We're talking about a solid album, a great album, an album that is loved by so many people and did so much for pop punk as a genre of music. The first time that Blink really sort of perfected their sound, I feel, to be completely honest with you. It wasn't really perfected until this album. First time they did more like serious songs, like Stay Together with the Kids. That stuff is just very different for the band at the time. Yeah, I love this album. It's just there's some that I think are better. Alright, so I'm going to get into it, alright. Next up in the list, we've got Enema of the State. Again, another contender for 1 or 2 in the list of Blink albums across their career, yeah. An album that I revisit a lot, especially in summer. As soon as the sun comes out here in England, I'm like, Enema of the State is the album to go to and listen to right now. It's just got that American Pie sound and feel to it that everyone knows and loves. And it's the first time that the band obviously really made a name for themselves. First time Travis was in the band, elevated the music, all that good stuff. Solid album. It's in top 3 for a reason, alright? Number 2, Controversial. It's going to be their latest album, One More Time. And again, controversial. Most people, when it comes to things like this, will always pick bands' earlier albums and earlier work because that's just how people are. It's how human beings tend to behave in terms of music and connections to music and stuff. I'm not like that. I don't believe in that. Like, if a band releases an album 20 years into their career and I just so happen to love it more, it hits me more, I'm going to prefer that album over the first or second or third album that I heard when I was a kid or whatever, right? It's just the way I am as a person. But One More Time, again, came out and it was solid front to back. First time that the band since Neighborhoods like really came into their own, made amends, fixed everything, sounds amazing. This was the next time. So I've seen the band live on the Neighborhood cycle, on the California cycle, and then on this One More Time cycle, and it was the best they've ever sounded, best they've ever looked, best production. Everything is just 10 out of 10. This album was like just a return to form, but also a move and a push forward, and it just kind of came out at the right time, and I was just absolutely stoked on it when it came out, and I still love it to this day. Number 1 is going to be self-titled. It's kind of obvious at this point, right? And again, this is probably going to be at least in most people's top 3, I would say, or assume. At least if you're in my kind of generation and you kind of grew up in a similar time period to me, because it would have impacted your life in a similar way to what it did for me. So this album is just that perfect blend of like the old and the new, the experimenting stuff, the serious stuff. Some of it's a little bit more fun. The aesthetic of the band at the time, the artwork, like I said, the time period it came out, it just really changed a lot. and still, probably to this day, is still the number one Blink album that I'll come back to the most and revisit the most and re-listen to the most. So yeah, that's my list, that's my reasoning, that's my opinions. Let me know what your list is, let me know what you think, let me know what you feel about these albums and Blink as a whole. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.